for some people that might have, that incident might feel, sort of minimalist, in the
Mhm, mhm,
context of the kind of um, racial discord and discrimination that occurred in the South
mhm.
at that time. Um,
Okay.
but, clearly to me, that was an insistence on a kind of dignity that,
Mhm.
Yes.
that she insisted upon. She wasn't gonna be foolish about it and,
Right.
it, endanger the safety and lives of her family, but
Mhm.
she was insistent upon taking a stand for her dignity and the dignity of her family under those circumstances.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the fifth season of In the Telling. We are really excited about season 5, which spans the global Black world with intimate conversations about family, both blood and chosen. I am Miranda, and I am joined by my amazing co host, Stephen G. Fullwood, and we are the founders of the Nomadic Archivist Project.
Our guest today is Germaine Ingram, who is a performing artist, vocal and movement improviser, percussive dancer, cultural strategist, writer, oral historian, and archivist. A principal focus of her practice is the histories and culture of Philadelphians of the African diaspora. She creates songs and texts and choreographies for performance works and designs and executes projects that tell stories of African American life, arts, and culture. She designs and supports environments and creative structures for exploring the power of improvisation to animate performance and hone habits of connection among people and between people and their built and natural environments. Her archival work challenges the ways that conventional archives tell stories of African Americans and other marginalized people. Her work also supports the important African American cultural bearers in collecting and preserving their archival assets. Please welcome to the show, Germaine Ingram. Hi, Germaine.
Hi there.
Welcome, welcome.
It's great to be here.
It's great to have you on the
Great to
show with
have you.
us. We're looking forward to digging into some of your family history with you.
Yes.
Um, so, Jermaine, the way that we like to kick things off here on the podcast is to really sort of ground our listeners in a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and,
hmm
a little bit about your family background.
Sure. Well, I consider myself a lifelong Philadelphian, even though I, I've spent a little time other places like Washington, D.C. and Boston. But for most of my
hmm
almost 79 years, I've been in Philadelphia. Um, my parents, were part of the Great Migration. They were both from Georgia. My mother originally from Hartwell, Georgia, then Athens, Georgia. My father
Okay.
from Atlanta.
hmm
But my father was, in his early teens when he came to Philadelphia. Both his parents had died, and his oldest
hmm
brother brought my father and my father's other siblings to Philadelphia. And my father actually went to high school here, went to Central High School here in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia
hmm
became his lifelong home. And when he married my mom, she came to Philadelphia, and that's where our family was rooted, actually in North
Okay.
Philadelphia. It's significant to me that when my parents brought me home from the hospital, we lived in a one-bedroom apartment, a first-floor apartment, a one-bedroom apartment on 12th Street in North Philadelphia. And when,
Okay.
my father went to college at night, at Temple
Yeah.
University, got
hmm
a
hmm
degree in business administration, and,
Okay.
I think one of the things he did to make money while he was in college was, was to clean and press graduation gowns. Um,
Mm.
and one of his first jobs after college was working in a real estate office. And
Mhm.
later on, my parents had their own real estate business in North Philadelphia.
Oh,
Um,
Okay.
okay.
in the in what's now called Cecil B. Moore Avenue. At that time, it was called Columbia
Okay.
Avenue, but now it's called
Okay.
after the great civil rights
Yeah.
advocate Cecil
Mhm.
B. Moore, who was responsible for integrating Girard College and
Mhm.
responsible actually for integrating the downtown department stores in Philadelphia.
Oh,
Up
wow.
until this
Yeah.
Okay.
campaign
Wow.
a campaign by Cecil B. Moore when he was president of the Philadelphia chapter, the NAACP. There were no,
Mhm.
there were no Black, salespeople at the downtown,
Okay.
um, at the downtown department stores. If you wanna hear really engaging story, I'm happy to tell you about that 'cause, I was doing some research on Cecil, and I met one of his lieutenant's colleagues um, at the NAACP. Isaiah Crippens was his name, and
Mhm.
Crippens told me that Cecil had given him the responsibility of setting up meetings with the executives of the Wanamaker's department store. That was Wanamaker's was the premier department store in Philadelphia, and Cecil's
Mhm.
Okay.
strategy was that if they could integrate Wanamaker's, then the other department stores, Strawbridge's, Blumberg's, Bonwit Tellers, Lit Brothers, these other department stores would
They don't
fall in
follow.
line.
Right.
But
Mhm.
Crippen said that it's impossible for him to get a meeting. They just ignored him. Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it was impossible to get a meeting with the executives. And finally, one day, he said to Cecil, this is hopeless. I can't get a I can't get a meeting with them." So Crippens told me that Cecil said to him, "I want you to call up those executives at Wanamaker's and tell them if we don't get a meeting within the next week, I'm gonna bring some of the fattest, blackest women in Philadelphia down to try on all your dresses. Your
Oh
not only
gosh.
your dresses in the basement, but your
Wow.
dresses throughout your store." And well, apparently that was the trick because
Okay.
within days, Cecil had a meeting with the Wanamaker's executives, and shortly thereafter, Wanamaker's hired its first Black salespeople.
That is a
Mm.
story. Wow. One I've never heard before, and that's an interesting campaign. Apparently and it was successful. Wow, my goodness.
Hmm. Like,
Well, that was
shows
the
you
kind of
kind of
guerrilla
fear people
tactics
had.
that Cecil used.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the fear that he knew people had to tap into
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
North
Okay.
Philadelphia having its, sort of own character and quality. Philadelphia is known as a
Mhm.
city of neighborhoods. So,
Okay.
Right.
there are multiple, each of Philadelphia's many neighborhoods has its own distinctive, quality and, ethnic background. Possibly less so than I was growing up, but Philadelphia continues to be, a city of neighborhoods. Um, I also
Okay.
Mhm.
consider
Mhm.
myself a
Mhm.
fully recovered lawyer. I was a lawyer for 30
Okay.
years before,
Okay.
I became a full-time artist. There was some overlap between my legal
Okay.
career, which was quite varied. I did a number of things during those 30 years. But there was
Mhm.
overlap between that and my performance career. My way into performance was through tap dance. I was in
Okay.
my, I think, mid 30s and I'd been a lawyer for 10 years when, for some reason, I decided I wanted to learn to tap dance, and I was fortunate enough to find this, really amazing Philadelphia hoofer, Levon Robinson, um, who
Mm,
is, really iconic and is was known not only locally, but, nationally and internationally, and,
Okay.
I was fortunate enough that, even though I couldn't even do a clean time step at the time, he, um, he took me on as a student, and, he became
Uh-huh.
my mentor and my professional dance partner, and we spent, 25 years together,
wow.
in performance.
Wow.
So, yeah, he died in 2008, but he was really
Mhm.
my entry into performance as a percussive dancer and
Mhm.
also into that world of African
Okay.
American, stage performers of
Mhm.
the
Right.
20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. It
Mm.
was through
Right.
that avenue of working with Levon that, I got to know the women that, um, who were the focus of, um, a really extensive oral history project that I did in the 1980s and 1990s that
Mhm.
became a stage review that, we called Stepping in Time,
Okay.
and
Okay.
then which later became, a film documentary, called Plenty of Good Women Dancers, and,
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
that was focused on 4 African American veteran women dancers from, who made their careers in Philadelphia, and,
Okay.
I was really interested in excavating their lives because, in the 1980s, when there was supposedly a resurgence of tap dance. I mean, tap dance never died, but but for some
Mm.
reason, there was this notion that it need to be reinvigorated, and, and for many of the African American men who were part of the history of tap. There were new opportunities for them to perform and to teach, but for many
Mhm.
of the women, the African American women who were as much a part of creating that history as the men, there weren't those same opportunities. So I took it upon
Okay.
myself
Right.
to try to address that lapse, at least in the Philadelphia area, by learning about, and making more visible the lives and the work of 4 African American women, who were
Mm.
extraordinary dancers and performers and teachers as well, great educators of the form.
Did you know about those women before you got into dance?
Not at all. There were 2 people who were really
Mhm.
key to my association with these women. Um, first Levon that I've told you about, and also, Cheryl Willis, who was at that time was
Oh,
getting her PhD in dance at Temple University, and she, did her dissertation on women
Mm,
in tap in Philadelphia, and she
okay.
was the mechanism. She was my introduction to many of these women, and, I'm forever grateful to her for, creating an opportunity for me to have, just to get to know people that I would not otherwise have known, and
yeah.
to, giving me an avenue into a part of my life that has been just, an incredible gift and treasure.
Sounds fantastic.
Yeah. Anybody in your family, dance or, were into jazz that sort of inspired you to get onto this path?
Well, yeah, there were people. Well, everybody danced,
Right, right.
um
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
but, nobody in my family was a professional dancer. I had a younger brother who passed away, who was a jazz singer, who
Mm,
during the
okay.
last years, about 15, 20 years of his life, lived in Japan, and,
Mm,
was a jazz singer there,
Okay.
and he was sort of an itinerant director of soul choirs, what he called soul choirs in Japan. So,
Mhm.
hmm.
um,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so he
That's
was
Okay.
interesting.
teaching,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Japanese folks who had, ve very little fluency in English, and they were singing "Oh Happy Day," and,
Mhm.
and
Nice.
other,
Very nice.
inspirational songs from the
Yeah.
Black experience.
Thank you so much for the large opening. I can see you coming from this, your parents coming, and then you coming, and then you coming to yourself, and then you were a lawyer, and then you migrated to being an artist, and you gave us some sensibility about how you got started. What family story do you want to share with us today, Jermaine?
Well, I wanna tell a story, about, a time in the late 1950s when, I traveled with my mother and some other relatives to see my maternal grandmother in,
Mhm.
in Athens, Georgia. And that experience, was important to me, probably, certainly more important to me now than it was then. Now that I really understand the implications of what occurred, but it was an opportunity to really understand the mettle of, my mother, her courage, to get
Mm,
to
Mhm.
understand, her strength of personality. But it was also an introduction to the, um, the terroristic, atmosphere that,
Mhm.
existed in the
yeah.
South pre-civil rights era.
Please share with
Oh,
us. That
yeah.
would be awesome. Mhm.
It was the late 1950s. I was about 11 years old when we took a family road trip from our home in Philly to Athens, Georgia to see my maternal grandmother. My father stayed home. On the trip was my mother's sister, my younger brother, a young cousin, and me, riding in my family's Ford Country Squire station wagon. My mother was doing most of the driving. It was getting daylight when we stopped at a roadside diner in South Carolina after driving all night. A sign on the door said whites only. A black man came out of the diner to take our order for food as we sat in the dirt parking lot. It seemed like my mother wanted to keep things simple, so she didn't ask us what we wanted to eat. She ordered several fried egg sandwiches and paid the man. Not much later, the man came back with a brown paper bag containing the sandwiches, and then he retreated to the diner. We continued to sit in the parking lot while we opened and began to eat the food. Within several minutes, the man returned and told my mother that the boss said that we couldn't sit in the parking lot and eat, that we could pull behind a billboard that was behind the diner. My mother replied, "We didn't buy this food behind a billboard. We aren't going to eat it behind a billboard." The man said the boss would call the sheriff if we didn't move on and ran back inside the diner. Everyone but my mother seemed paralyzed as we sat there. I wasn't too young to know about the abduction and lynching of 14-year-old Emmett Till in 1955 in Mississippi, and the message that sent about what could happen in the South to Negroes who were considered uppity. After what felt to me like an eternity, my mother turned the key in the ignition, and we drove out of the parking lot and continued our journey. To this day, I can't stand the smell or taste of fried eggs.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And Jermaine, you said you were how old during this trip?
I was about 11. I was about 11 at the time.
Okay.
11.
I was born in
Okay.
1947.
Okay. And as an 11-year-old at that time, like, what did you understand about that situation and the larger contextual situation of the social political atmosphere in the States?
Well, Philadelphia was certainly no bastion of of
Mhm.
integration and racial
Right,
equality. Um,
right.
so until that time, I hadn't really experienced any any situation where I felt explicitly excluded
Okay.
Right.
due to race. I mean, certainly in
Okay.
Philadelphia, there were neighborhoods that we couldn't go through, go to
Mhm.
if we had any sense.
Okay.
Um, there
Mhm.
was
Okay.
Mhm.
there was housing segregation in the
Right.
neighborhood
Mhm.
where I lived in North Philadelphia was almost exclusively black, but
Right.
it was socioeconomically diverse. Um,
Right.
we lived next door to someone from what they call the oldest profession, but we also had doctors and other
Mhm.
professionals who lived in the neighborhood. I lived down the street from a housing project, but the housing project, at least to my mind at that time, was just another place where people lived. It wasn't
Okay.
associated with sort of
Okay.
deprivation or how we've come to think
Right.
of housing projects.
Mhm.
I remember that
It was on
I had a friend who lived in Richard Allen Homes, it was called. It was just a block from where we had a house, and my friend's father was a technician for RCA, who made
Mhm.
televisions. And that was the first place I saw a color television. It was,
Oh.
sort of
Okay.
very rudimentary technology at the time, but,
Mhm.
they lived, what seemed to me a solidly middle class life, and they were the first people I knew to have a color television set.
When Miranda was getting back earlier when we were thinking about the context of the feeling that you had as an 11-year-old at that time and your political awareness, when you were watching your mother respond to the diner owner, like what do you think it sparked in your thinking at that age, if anything?
Well, certainly fear. Um,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
don't know I really don't know whether my younger brother and cousin, sort of understood the implications. Um,
Mhm.
as I said, I was familiar, I understood what had happened with Emmett Till. So,
Mhm.
I was very conscious
Okay.
of the danger and the threat. Um, and, interestingly, I don't think I had a conversation with my mother about that incident.
Mm.
I mean, I
Mhm.
really
Then
you know,
and later?
never.
Never. Wow, okay.
Never. Okay.
Did she say anything to you guys when it was happening or after it happened?
Not that I recall. We just
Okay.
drove off and continued on our trip to Georgia.
Wow.
That's
And
how
was
I
your
heard it in my mind that your
Yeah.
mom, because of the way she ordered for everyone, her words to that waiter, and then, like you said, it seemed like an eternity before she turned ignition, and then she drove off. Then the very cinematic mind to mind, that was that, and now we got to take care of this other stuff. We're going to keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it felt. It was
Mm.
like it was almost like a frozen frame.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and once we left that frame, we continued on our way. I know
Mhm.
that, I was affected by it. It wasn't like the anxiety, the fear of that moment disappeared. And the fact that I remember it so distinctly to this day is an indication of the impact of that incident.
Mm.
And your mom seems like was she always a very, like, no nonsense, kinda tough woman, or do you feel like with your absence of your father, that played a
Mm.
role in how she responded to, the person at the diner?
No, I think that was probably reflective of my mother's personality.
Okay. Okay.
My mother was a kinda no nonsense
Okay.
Mhm.
kinda person. Um,
Okay.
you know very congenial, in most situations, but, yeah, but she could be hard edged when she wanted to be.
Okay. And do you feel like your mother was fully cognizant of I would imagine, you know, of the danger that you all were in at that moment and was still
I'm sure sh
demanding
I'm sure
her
she was. She
humanity
grew
and
up
the
in the South.
humanity of you all? Yeah. Okay.
She grew up in the South. She
Yeah.
knew, I mean,
Right.
um
Right.
and I have she knew how long she could sit there,
Mhm.
um, before turning to
Yeah.
before inviting a kind of danger that
Sure.
for herself and for her family, for her children.
Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right.
So, did you speak with anyone in the family about this incident, either then or now? Not just your mom, but your cousin and your sibling? Did you ever have
I
a
don't
So
conversation
bad.
about it?
I can't really recall having conversations with them about it either. I
Okay.
Hmm.
might have talked to
Okay.
my father about it. My father died when I was 16. So,
Okay.
I might have
Mm.
talked to my father about it, but I don't recall having conversations with any of my siblings or my cousin about it.
Hmm.
Mm. Were there other incidents or did that anxiety stay with you until you got home?
Um, a as far as I don't recall anything, remarkable like that, in the trip.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
The rest of the trip was, sort of, a family, just a family gathering at my grandmother's house, in Georgia and, um, becoming acquainted with, cooking on a wood
Mhm.
stove and, uh,
Yeah.
and a way of life that was
Nice.
very foreign to me, having come up
Mhm.
in Philadelphia.
What I
Alright,
love
fair
about
enough.
what Miranda's, she was thinking about the relationship between you and your mom. The thing I'm very interested in is this notion of your mother refusing to eat behind a billboard, right? And how that resonates with you today. Is that something you've carried? Is that a lesson or a thought that you've carried with you about your own practice, the way that you're an artistic, all the different things that you do as an oral historian, as a dancer, choreographer? Like, how do you, does that sensibility inform you in any kind of way?
Um, I think it's certainly an example of how we each construct the way that we hold on to dignity.
Okay.
Um,
Mhm.
you know, um, for some people that might have, that incident might feel, sort of minimalist, in the context of the kind of um, racial discord and discrimination that occurred in the South at
Mhm.
that time. Um,
Okay.
but clearly to me, that was an insistence on a kind of dignity that,
Yes.
that she insisted upon. She wasn't gonna be foolish about it and,
Right.
it, endanger the safety and lives of her family, but
Mhm.
she was insistent upon taking a stand for her dignity and the dignity of her family under those circumstances. Um, it
Mhm.
sometimes makes me think about, there's a book that I really love called, I Wanna Be Ready, and,
Mm.
by Danielle Goldman,
Mhm.
and, it's about improvisation, it's about improvisational dance, but one of the through lines in the book is the impact of tight spaces on improvisation, that,
Okay.
tight spaces provoke, a kind of imagination and improvisational spirit.
Okay.
And, I think
Okay.
of that situation as being one of those tight spaces that, required a kind of, imagination and improvisation to insist upon dignity, in the face
Mhm,
of,
mhm.
terrorism and danger.
That's a wonderful way to put it.
Yeah.
What would you like for folks to know about this story and storytelling as a storyteller, as someone who choreographs, someone who works with people, um, that is involved civically about this story?
Um, Especially in this time in these times,
Mhm,
I think this is the kind of story that has continuing resonance,
mhm.
um, because well, it's always been there. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but we're seeing now a kind of oppression and, abusiveness, um, state-sponsored and privately sponsored violence against people of color and people who are
Mhm.
considered other. Um,
Right.
Right.
and,
Mhm.
this story is simply representative of, this long line of history that Black people
Mhm.
have had to endure and,
Mhm.
had to and it's the context in which we've had to, maintain our dignity. I mean, just a week
Yeah.
ago, um, the the exhibition at the President's House here in Philadelphia was dismantled
Mhm.
by the Trump administration, by the National Park Service.
Okay.
This memorial
Yeah.
at what was the original White House, um, that, was located in downtown Philadelphia. This memorial that paid homage to the 9 enslaved Africans who served George Washington and Martha Washington in the late 1790s. And,
Mhm.
the Trump administration concluded that, it was history that would best be erased. Um,
Mhm.
and, it's representative of how we're perpetually,
Mhm.
addressing these, same challenges to our
Mhm.
history, to our contributions, to, our, um
Yeah.
to our presence, to our
Yeah.
integral part in the history of this country.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's very interesting to hear, especially I've gotten to know you over the last couple of years and just to hear how deeply rooted Philadelphia's culture and changing culture, but also historic relevance
Mhm.
to not only the country, but also to you and to your family. So it's really, as you speak more about, like yourself in Philly or, your work or your family, it really does help to paint like a bigger picture of like who
Mhm.
you are and how you operate in the world and how Philadelphia is such an integral part of, your identity.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's been wonderful to kind of over this time to, like, really unpack it, like, almost like an onion and see how it
Mhm.
unravels.
Yeah, I mean, Philadelphia never ceases to provide, these inspiring and provocative, engagements for me. So,
Oh, wow.
I
Nice.
don't regret at all, um, spending
Mm,
my life here.
Yeah,
beautiful.
that's great. That's great.
Beautiful.
It's wonderful, yeah. Well, thank you again for coming on In the Telling and for sharing a story with us. It's been really wonderful to listen to you and to be engaged with you today.
Hmm.
Any final words that you have for us or our listeners?
Well, my final words would be to thank you both for, for starting this wonderful project, Nomadic Archivist Project, because I think it's so important to the work that we need to do, to, make sure that our stories, um,
Yeah,
are preserved, are articulated. We need to have those conversations with ourselves, and
Right.
then have the
absolutely.
conversations
Absolutely.
with others. So, thank you so much
Hmm.
for your work and your dedication to this cause.
You.
Yes. Well,
Thank you
thank
very
you, and
much.
thank you for yours too.
Yes, thank you for yours. Hey everyone, are you interested in archives but don't know where to start? Well, maybe you will enjoy Nap's Kickback. Every other Tuesday, Miranda and I, and sometimes with special guests, have a conversation over a live stream about the basics of archives in a relaxed space. You should check us out. Previous live streams of Nap Kickbacks are now available on our YouTube channel, Nomadic Archivist. Join us every other Tuesday to be in community with us. This is also where you can find this and previous seasons of In the Telling. For more information about NAP, sign up for our newsletter, go to our website at nomadicarchivistproject.com.